Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Avery Monroe. I'm 21, a computer engineering major at Oregon State. I never thought I'd be telling this story, certainly not like this. But when your entire reality is ripped apart by the people who gave you life, silence becomes a prison. And I refuse to stay quiet anymore. This story is about my sister, Lila. She's everything to me. Younger by 4 years, she used to light up rooms with nothing more than her presence. Lila danced like she was born without bones, light as a feather and fierce as fire. Our grandfather used to say she was made of music and starlight. He wasn't wrong. We lived in a quiet Oregon town, the kind where everyone waves hello and the local diner remembers your order. Our home was nestled at the end of a pine-draped road, a rustic two-story with a red roof and a garden full of wild daisies. The Monroe family looked like a postcard. My dad, Daniel, was the head accountant at a construction firm, clean-cut, always polished, the guy who never forgot a neighbor's birthday. My mom, Marissa, was an elementary school teacher with a warm smile and sermons on kindness at church. But behind the walls of that perfect little home, reality rotted in silence. 2 years ago, it all fell apart. Lila was 15, returning from a performance in Portland with our grandfather when a drunk truck driver ran a red light and slammed into them. Grandpa died instantly. Lila survived, but her spine didn't. She came out of that wreck paralyzed from the waist down. I remember the first time I saw her in the hospital. She was lying there with tubes in her arms, her hair matted, her eyes empty. When she saw me, she tried to smile and whispered, "Avery, I'm okay." But I knew she wasn't. And things only got worse from there. You'd think a family would rally around a daughter who'd suffered so much. Mine did the opposite. At first, it was subtle. Mom sighing more when pushing her wheelchair. Dad never looking her in the eye. Then came the comments behind closed doors. "She's a burden now. What are we going to do with her future gone?" I heard them. Every word. But I kept pretending. For Lila. She still had hope in her eyes. Still smiled at me like I was her safe place. What changed everything was the trust fund. Grandpa, bless his soul, had left $1 million fund in Lila's name. Not a penny for anyone else. He wanted her to chase her dreams, no matter what. After the accident, I started noticing how our parents looked at Lila, not with love, but calculation. And that's when I knew. They weren't just giving up on her. They were planning something. So I did the only thing I could. I installed a GPS tracker on her wheelchair. Discreet. Silent. Connected to my phone. And one day, that tracker saved her life. It was a Saturday when it happened. I was at my dorm when Lila texted me, "Mom and Dad are taking me hiking. They say we need a family day." Hiking? With a wheelchair? My gut screamed. I opened the GPS app. Lila was still at home. I texted her back to be careful and told myself I was overthinking. But the next morning, that little dot started moving. 40 miles northwest. Toward Black Ridge Cliff. I called Lila. No answer. Called Mom. Nothing. Dad? Voicemail. That's when I got in my car and started driving like hell. By the time I reached the trailhead, their SUV was already parked. I hiked fast, heart pounding, following the GPS signal. And that's when I saw them. Standing at the cliff's edge. Lila. In her wheelchair. Dad behind her. Mom at his side. And in the next breath, the moment that shattered everything, I watched my own father grip the handles. And shove. The scream. Lila's voice. Then silence. And just like that, they turned and walked away. Like they had taken out the trash. I dropped to my knees behind a rock, shaking. My vision blurred with rage and horror. They didn't see me. But I saw everything. And I wasn't going to let it end like that. Not for Lila. Not for me. The moment they disappeared into the trees, I broke cover and sprinted to the cliff's edge, gasping for breath. My mind was a storm of panic and rage. I dropped to my stomach and peered over. At first, all I saw were rocks and shadows. Then, her. Lila's wheelchair was crumpled on a ledge about 20 feet down. But next to it, her fragile body lay twisted, still. Blood trickled from her forehead. But she moved. She was alive. I scrambled down the rocky incline, tearing my hands on sharp branches and jagged stones. I didn't care. Every step closer to Lila was a fight against fear. Lila. I called. Her eyes fluttered open. Avery. Her voice was barely a whisper. They pushed me. I know. I saw. I'm here now. I've got you. I cradled her gently. She was trembling, cold and in shock. I checked for broken bones. Miraculously, aside from the gash on her forehead and bruises down her arms, she seemed intact. The wheelchair had absorbed most of the impact. But we were still trapped at the bottom of a damn cliff. There was no signal, no help. I had one choice. I hoisted her onto my back. And I climbed. The path was steep and cruel. My shoes slipped on wet stone. Thorns tore at our clothes. Lila was light, but every step felt like carrying the weight of the world. My legs burned. My lungs screamed. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Hang on, Lila, I kept whispering. You're not going to die here. Every time her breath weakened, I'd shift her weight, whisper her favorite story, remind her of our daisy garden back home. Anything to keep her conscious. By the time I reached the trail, I was soaked in sweat and blood. I laid her down gently and wrapped my hoodie around her. Her eyes were open now, but unfocused. I rushed her to the car, breaking every speed limit back to town. Her head rested on my lap in the back seat, her blood staining my jeans. I didn't care. I kept whispering to her. You're okay. You're safe now. At the emergency room, they rushed her in. Internal bleeding. Concussion. Hypothermia. But they stabilized her. Lila lived. And my parents, they thought she was dead. While Lila lay unconscious in the ICU, I sat in the waiting room, gripping my phone. A new message had just come in, from Mom. Your sister went missing on the hike. Come home. Police are looking. I stared at it. Missing? They dared call it that? I nearly laughed out loud in the sterile, silent hospital corridor. The nerve. The rehearsed performance. I could picture it, Mom sobbing, Dad speaking in low, serious tones about how it was just a tragic accident. I clenched my fists. This was worse than betrayal. It was evil. And they were already rewriting the narrative. But here's the thing about stories, when you know the ending, the lies start to unravel. While my parents were filing reports and preparing to access the trust fund, I was sitting next to their victim. Holding her hand. Watching her breathe. She didn't deserve this. No one did. And the pain didn't end with the fall. The nurses didn't know yet, but I told them I was the only family member to be notified. I didn't want our parents anywhere near her. Not until I figured out what to do next. I charged my phone and replayed the events over and over. What do I do? Call the cops? The media? A lawyer? Would anyone even believe me? Then I remembered, the GPS tracker. The data was all there, Lila's movements logged in real time, showing the route to Black Ridge Cliff and the exact location of her fall. That was something. It wasn't everything. But it was something. I downloaded the file and backed it up twice. Then I remembered another detail, one I hadn't thought would matter. I'd set up a motion-activated security camera at the side of the house last semester. It covered part of the porch and driveway. I set it up to watch for package theft. Maybe, just maybe, it caught something. Something I could use. I had to go back. I scribbled a note and left it on Lila's bedside table. Don't worry. I'm coming back. I promise. Then I drove home. I parked down the street and approached the house from the back. I'd grown up in this house, but that night, it felt like enemy territory. Like every creak of wood and gust of wind might betray me. The lights were on. Voices inside. I slipped through the garage and into the crawl space, up through the side door. My parents were in the living room, sitting, drinking wine, and laughing. My stomach turned. Like nothing happened. Like they hadn't shoved their daughter off a cliff. Like they hadn't just committed murder. I moved fast. The security drive was hidden in a drawer in my room. I yanked it out, plugged it into my laptop, and began scrubbing the footage. Hours of nothing. Then, 3 nights before the hike. There they were. Standing outside by the car. Whispering. And then I heard it. "We have to do this, Marissa," Dad said. "She's just wasting away," Mom replied. "That money can help us retire early. Start fresh. She's not going to use it. No one will suspect. It'll look like an accident." I paused the video. My mouth dry. I had them. I took the file and backed it up in 3 different places. Then I crept out of the house and drove back to the hospital, my hands shaking. Lila was still asleep. I sat beside her, holding her hand, and whispered. "We're going to bring them down." Because the worst part of betrayal is realizing it never came from strangers. I barely slept that night. I sat beside Lila in the hospital, watching the steady rhythm of her chest rise and fall beneath the blanket. She was alive, miraculously, but the damage went far deeper than the bruises on her skin. It was trust. It was family. It was everything we once believed shattered in a single push. By morning, the nurse came in with a soft smile, letting me know Lila was stable enough to be moved into recovery. I followed the gurney down the hallway like a shadow. I refused to leave her side. The doctors didn't ask questions. They assumed I was just a devoted older brother. I was. But I was also a silent witness, and now, a ticking bomb of truth. Lila opened her eyes later that afternoon. Her voice was raspy, dry. "Avery." I leaned in. "I'm here." She blinked slowly, then whispered, "Did they really do it? Did they push me?" I froze. Part of me wanted to lie. To protect her. But I couldn't. I nodded. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. She just turned her head to the side and whispered, "Okay." That one word, it broke me. Not because she sounded angry. But because she didn't. She sounded resigned. Like part of her had already known. "Lila, I swear to you," I said, gripping her hand, "I have everything. The GPS data. Security footage. Proof they planned it. I'm going to make sure they pay for what they did." She looked back at me then, and something flickered in her eyes. Not just pain, but something deeper. Relief. "They think I'm dead," she murmured. "They do," I said. "And we're going to use that." I contacted our grandfather's old lawyer, James Harper. He was semi-retired, living in Bend, but when I told him what happened, he drove up the next morning. He reviewed the footage, the GPS data, the texts, the hospital report. He sat in silence for a long time, then finally said, "This is attempted murder." And it's premeditated. I nodded, my heart thudding in my chest. What can we do? We go to the police. But before that, we build the case. We get them to show their hand. He explained it like chess. If we exposed our evidence too soon, they'd lawyer up, cry misunderstanding, and try to spin the narrative. But if we let them think they'd gotten away with it, they'd get bold. And make a mistake. Let's feed them just enough rope to hang themselves, he said. So we did. Using a burner account, I posted a vague but juicy update in our town's Facebook group, where every nosy neighbor liked to gossip. Rumor has it Lila Monroe was found alive near Black Ridge Cliff, mumbling something about being pushed. Anyone else hear this? Within an hour, the post had over 80 comments. Within 2 hours, my phone buzzed. It was the hospital. Hi, Mr. Monroe. Your parents, they called. They want to come visit Lila. I felt the blood drain from my face. Did you tell them anything? No, the nurse assured me. We said she was under observation, but didn't confirm identity. But, they sounded frantic. And, something felt off. I hung up and paced the hallway. They were panicking. Which meant we had them. I rushed back to Lila's room. She was awake, reading the same Jane Austen novel she always went back to. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes met mine. They're coming, aren't they? She asked quietly. I nodded. You okay with that? Her lips pressed into a thin line. I want to see their faces when they realize I'm not dead. I swallowed hard. Then let's play this smart. The next day, they came. Dressed in black. Like they were in mourning. The nurse buzzed me just before they arrived. I ducked into the adjoining medical supply closet, where I'd hidden a small GoPro camera aimed discreetly through the vent into Lila's room. Every word, every gesture, recorded. Mom entered first, clutching a paper bag. Dad followed stiffly, holding a bottle of what looked like mineral water. Lila, Mom sobbed, rushing to her bedside. Oh my God. You're alive. You don't know how scared we were. Lila lay still, eyes half-lidded. She didn't speak. Didn't even blink. Dad stepped forward, placing the water bottle and paper bag on the table. We brought your favorite cookies, he said quietly. And some water. You've probably been through a lot. They lingered for a moment longer. But Lila didn't respond. She didn't have to. They began whispering to each other as if she were unconscious. She doesn't look good, Mom said. We should have finished it the first time, Dad muttered. I almost kicked the door open right then. But I waited. Once they left, I slipped into the room and grabbed the items they'd brought. I wore gloves. Bagged the water and cookies. Then I called my friend Callum, a chemistry major with lab access. Within 24 hours, he had the results. The cookies were fine. But the water? Laced with a high-grade sedative, lethal in large doses. Enough to keep Lila asleep. Or worse. They had tried again. And this time, I had physical proof. I forwarded everything, GoPro footage, audio files, lab reports, to Mr. Harper. He didn't hesitate. This is it. We're going to the DA. That night, I sat by Lila's bedside. She was eating pudding, the first solid food she'd kept down in a week. She looked at me and asked, "Do you think they'll go to jail?" I nodded slowly. They're not just going to jail, Lila. They're going to rot there. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Good." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in my body electric with rage and exhaustion. I had everything I needed. Now came the hardest part. Making sure the world knew exactly what kind of monsters raised us. There's something strange about clarity. When you've been living in survival mode for so long, fighting through fog, betrayal, doubt, the moment you see the path forward, it feels almost surreal. After I handed over the evidence to Mr. Harper, after I watched Lila sip tea without fear of poison for the first time in weeks, the fog lifted. And in its place came something cold. Precise. Vengeance. Not the petty kind. Not the slash their tires, scream at them in public kind. No. This was something deeper. What my parents did wasn't just criminal. It was evil. They had already mourned Lila publicly, paraded their grief to the town, applied for the trust fund, and poisoned their daughter in a hospital bed. This wasn't desperation. It was strategy. I didn't just want to win. I wanted to burn their legacy to the ground. Mr. Harper had a plan. We file for emergency protection and petition to freeze access to the trust, he said. But first, we let them think they've won. That way, we catch their final move. We couldn't let them know Lila was pressing charges yet. So I stayed quiet. Let the rumor mill churn. Let the town see my parents continuing their act, attending church, holding candlelight vigils, pretending to cope. Meanwhile, I was busy gathering reinforcements. My cousin Jamie, our grandfather's niece, was a journalist in Portland. When I called her and told her everything, she didn't even hesitate. You get me an official charge filed, Avery, and I'll blow this story up like dynamite. Done. But I wasn't just waiting for the court date. I was baiting a trap. First, I uploaded a second anonymous post to the local Facebook group. Something simple. Strange behavior from the Monroes lately. Rumor is they're about to receive a trust payout after their daughter's accident. Anyone else find that timing suspicious? Boom. 300 comments in under an hour. I watched the chaos unfold. People who'd known my parents for years began whispering. Connecting dots. Their grief looked too clean, their timeline too convenient. A neighbor even posted a photo from our Ring doorbell cam, Mom carrying what looked like a file folder to her car just hours after reporting Lila missing. The court of public opinion was cracking. Now it was time for the law. Mr. Harper filed a formal complaint with the district attorney, attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraudulent intent to access a protected trust. He attached the GPS logs, the video footage, the toxicology reports, and even the audio from the GoPro. We didn't just have evidence. We had a case. And when the DA's office called me personally, the investigator's voice was grim. Mr. Monroe, I've never seen something this calculated. We'll be filing arrest warrants within the week. I hung up and went straight to Lila's room. She was sketching the old daisy garden from our childhood, one petal at a time. I sat beside her and said, "They're coming for them." Her eyes didn't leave the paper. Good. But, I added carefully, there's something else. She looked up. I want you to testify. The pencil stilled in her hand. Avery. You don't have to, I said quickly. But your words, your voice, it matters. If you're ready, if you want to say it in your own way, the court needs to hear it. She stared at the flowers on the page for a long time. Then nodded. The court date was set. 2 weeks from that day. In that time, everything shifted. My parents were served with a temporary court order freezing all attempts to access Lila's trust. The sheriff's office impounded their electronics. Their phones were subpoenaed. And they still didn't know the full extent of what we had. Because I wasn't done. I contacted the school board where my mom worked. I sent them a copy of the toxicology report and the investigation status. I didn't ask them to fire her. I just asked them one question. Would you trust your child alone with a woman capable of poisoning her own daughter? 2 days later, she was put on indefinite administrative leave. My father's company followed shortly after. Their PR department contacted me personally for confirmation of the allegations. I didn't need to say much. Just sent them the clip from the doorbell cam, the one where he said, "No one will suspect a thing." My dad was fired the next day. Still, the thing that haunted me wasn't their careers. It was their silence. Because they knew something was coming. They just didn't know when. 1 week before the trial, I got a letter. Mailed. No return address. Inside was a single, folded note. "You were always her favorite. Not ours." No signature. But I recognized my mother's handwriting instantly. I stared at the paper for 10 minutes. Not because I was hurt, but because it confirmed something I'd always feared was true. They'd never loved Lila. And maybe, not even me. But here's the thing about rejection. It can break you. Or it can build you into something stronger. The day before the trial, Lila was wheeled into the courtroom to rehearse with the prosecutor. She wore a navy blouse. Hair braided neatly. A quiet fierceness in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "You ready?" I whispered. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "They left me at the bottom of a cliff. I've already faced hell. What's a courtroom compared to that?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the hospital window, watching the lights of the city flicker. We were hours away from the moment everything would be exposed. All the lies. All the cruelty. All the twisted truths. And I promised myself one thing. When this was over, Lila would never have to look over her shoulder again. The morning of the trial felt like standing at the edge of a second cliff, but this time, I wasn't the one about to fall. The sky was gray. Oregon drizzle dusted the windows of the courthouse like a shroud, as if the town itself was bracing for something it wasn't ready to witness. Lila and I arrived early. I wheeled her through the back entrance, per the prosecutor's request, to avoid the gathering press out front. The moment we stepped into the courtroom hallway, my chest tightened. There they were. Daniel and Marissa Monroe. Our parents. My parents. Dressed in black again, fitting, I suppose. Mourning the version of themselves they were about to lose forever. Mom had bags under her eyes, but still clutched a tissue like it was part of the performance. Dad stood stiff, jaw tight, trying to keep his composure, but the twitch in his eye gave him away. When they saw Lila, it was like someone had punched them in the chest. Their faces drained of color. Their mouths fell slightly open. I could almost hear their thoughts. She's supposed to be dead. Lila didn't flinch. She stared directly at them. Calm. Cold. Beautiful in her silent defiance. We passed them without a word. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. Neighbors. Teachers. Journalists. Even people who barely knew us but wanted to support the family. Everyone loves a spectacle. The judge, a tall, sharp-eyed woman named Judge Carrington, opened proceedings swiftly. And then, it began. The prosecution wasted no time. The GPS tracker logs. The security footage from our porch, where my parents whispered their plan. The toxicology report from the water bottle. The GoPro audio from the hospital visit. Each piece of evidence slammed into the courtroom like a hammer. When the prosecutor played the clip of my father's voice, "This is our chance, no one will suspect an accident," the room fell deathly silent. Mom's shoulders shook. Whether from panic or shame, I couldn't tell. But she didn't cry. Not yet. Then they brought in the hospital nurse to testify. She spoke clearly about the off behavior from my parents. How they rushed the visit. Left suspicious items behind. And then. It was Lila's turn. I wheeled her slowly to the stand. She adjusted the microphone herself. And began to speak. Her voice was soft but steady. I believed my parents loved me. Even after the accident. Even when they stopped looking me in the eyes. I thought maybe they were just hurting. But when they took me to that cliff, I knew. Her eyes locked on them. My dad stood behind me. My mom stood beside him. And then. She paused. Swallowed hard. He pushed me. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. I screamed. I remember the fall. I remember the wind rushing past my face. I remember thinking, this is it. Her hands trembled slightly. If my brother hadn't found me, I wouldn't be here. Lila's voice cracked then. They tried to kill me. And when that didn't work, they tried again in my hospital room. Judge Carrington nodded solemnly. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I've ever felt. The defense tried their best. Claimed the cliff incident was a tragic accident. That my father had slipped behind the wheelchair. That the sedative in the water bottle was from an old prescription. That my mother had been too grief-stricken to notice. But the jury wasn't buying it. Neither was the judge. The cracks in their story were too wide to fill. And when the prosecutor cross-examined them, when he asked my father point-blank, "Why didn't you call 911 immediately after the fall?" He stammered. Then stayed silent. That silence sealed his fate. After 2 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The verdict? Guilty. On all counts. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. And attempted poisoning. I didn't cheer. Neither did Lila. We just looked at each other. And let the weight fall off our shoulders. The judge sentenced them to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. As the bailiffs led them away, my mother finally broke. She screamed Lila's name. "Lila. Please. We were desperate. You have no idea what we gave up for you." Lila didn't respond. But I did. I stood and said the one thing that had burned in me since the cliff. You didn't give up anything. You threw it away. Then I turned my back on them, for the last time. Outside the courthouse, Jamie, the journalist cousin, was waiting. Microphone in hand. She didn't say anything, just nodded. She already had the full story. And she was about to publish it everywhere. The Monroe legacy was a lie. Local parents convicted of attempted murder of their disabled daughter. It went viral within hours. People couldn't believe it. But we lived it. And now, the world knew. I thought that once the trial was over, once they were locked up, it would all be behind us. That we could breathe. That we were safe. But trauma doesn't follow a schedule. It lingers. It mutates. And just when I thought the worst was behind us, another twist reminded me that evil doesn't always go quietly. A week after the sentencing, Lila and I were back in the apartment in Seattle. It was small but warm. Full of sunlight and quiet. Lila's sketches hung on the walls, daisies, ballerinas, stars over Black Ridge Cliff. Somehow, she found beauty even in the ruins. One night, we sat watching an old ballet documentary. She was curled up in a blanket on the couch, and for the first time in years, I saw her smile without flinching. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. A few seconds later, a message came through. They never acted alone. You should ask Harper about the backup clause in the trust. My stomach twisted. Another text followed. Not everything you saved her from is over. You were only given half the story. I jumped to my feet. Lila. I need to make a call. She looked up, startled. What's wrong? I didn't answer. I grabbed my phone and went out to the balcony, dialing Mr. Harper immediately. He picked up on the second ring. Avery. I just got a message. Someone mentioned a backup clause in the trust. What are they talking about? Silence. Then a long exhale. I was going to bring this up once Lila turned 18 officially and took control of the fund. Bring what up? Harper's voice turned grave. There's a clause your grandfather added. A backup trustee. If anything were to happen to Lila, or if she were deemed mentally or physically incapable of managing the funds, the trust would pass to your Uncle Martin. My jaw clenched. Uncle Martin. The guy who hasn't shown his face in years. That Martin? Harper sighed. Yes. And it seems your parents knew that. I leaned over the railing, trying to steady my breath. You're telling me they might not have even been the ones planning this alone? They might have been pawns, Harper admitted. The poisoning attempt? That may have been Martin tying up loose ends. Because if Lila had died, Martin would have inherited the trust within 90 days. I hung up without saying another word. I didn't tell Lila right away. How could I? How do you explain that there might be another monster waiting behind the curtain? That the very person who'd vanished from your life might have been pulling strings to kill you from a distance. But the next day, the threat became real. Our apartment door was unlocked when we got home. Nothing was stolen. Nothing moved. Except for one thing. A single daisy, freshly picked, laid on Lila's pillow. We both stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered, "He used to pick those for me when I was little." My blood turned to ice. Martin had been here. I reported the break-in. The cops took it seriously, given the history. We were placed under temporary protective surveillance. But I couldn't rely on law enforcement alone. So I hacked Martin's email. I'm not proud of it, but I don't regret it. It didn't take long. Old accounts, reused passwords. Sloppy for someone trying to orchestrate something so dark. Inside his inbox were messages from 2 years ago, before the accident, between him and my dad. Daniel, she'll never walk again. The payout should go through as long as Lila's not capable. Martin, you sure it's safe? This kind of thing can blow up. Keep it clean. We both get what we want. Daniel, it's under control. If we push it off as an accident, no one will suspect. Martin, if there's trouble, I'll finish it myself. My vision blurred with rage. This wasn't just betrayal. This was an assassination attempt built on paperwork, greed, and bloodlines. I forwarded the entire email chain to Harper, the police, and Jamie. Within 24 hours, Martin was arrested trying to flee the country. Customs caught him at the Seattle-Tacoma airport. He had a fake passport, over $150,000 in cash, and a plane ticket to Singapore. The headlines exploded again. Third Monroe family member tied to attempted murder plot. Trust fund conspiracy exposed, the uncle behind the curtain. People had already been horrified by my parents. But Martin? That was betrayal from the shadows. A twist no one expected. Even the DA was stunned. They amended the case to include conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted murder for hire. Lila and I sat quietly that night, watching the news scroll across the TV screen. She sipped her tea and said, "I always wondered why he never came to Grandpa's funeral." I nodded. Because he was busy trying to cash in on his will. But there was one last surprise. Harper called again. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "But your grandfather added a codicil to the trust just months before he died. In handwriting. It wasn't found until now, buried in old files." "What does it say?" "It names you, Avery, as the secondary guardian of the trust if Lila's life is ever in danger." I froze. What? He didn't trust Martin. Your grandfather, he must have known something wasn't right. He made sure you'd be the one to protect her. Legally. Financially. All of it. I walked into Lila's room that night and told her everything. About Martin. About the clause. About Grandpa's codicil. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said something I'll never forget. "He always said you'd be my wings if I couldn't fly anymore." I knelt beside her wheelchair and took her hand. "You're not broken, Lila," I said. "They tried to take your voice. But now you've got the whole world listening." She smiled through her tears. "They tried to bury me," she said. "But I wasn't a seed. No. She was a wildfire. And now, nothing could stop her." It's strange how quiet life becomes after a storm. Not empty, just still. Martin was officially indicted on 3 federal charges, including conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted murder for hire. He pled not guilty, of course, but the email chain and flight records made it airtight. His trial is pending, but the prosecution is already calling it a slam dunk. My parents? They're nearly a year into their sentence. Maximum security. No parole hearings for at least 2 decades. We've had no contact. No letters. No apologies. Nothing. And honestly, that silence is the closest thing to peace they've ever given me. Lila and I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment just outside Seattle, big windows, quiet neighbors, and a view of the water. It's not fancy, but it's ours. Her health is improving. Physical therapy 3 times a week. She's regained a lot of strength in her upper body, enough to maneuver her own wheelchair now. She painted her bedroom light lavender and filled it with plants. And laughter. God, I missed her laugh. She's been sketching a lot, daisies, yes, but also portraits. Her latest piece. A charcoal drawing of Grandpa holding her hand on stage, like he used to during recitals. It's haunting. Beautiful. I had it framed. As for me, I graduated. I turned down a job in Silicon Valley to stay close to her, and instead, I started my own tech initiative, focused on building assistive technology for disabled youth. I named the flagship product after my sister. Project Lila, Life in Light Again. Every day we ship out sensors, voice-activated chairs, modified braces, and adaptive joysticks to kids who never thought independence was possible again. Every time I see one of those thank you messages come in, from a teenager in a hospital bed, or a parent crying into a webcam, I remember why I survived. Not for revenge. But for something more. Some nights, I still think about the cliff. Not just the moment my dad pushed her, but what happened after. The climb. The silence. The blood on my shirt. The weight of my sister on my back as I carried her up from death. I don't think I'll ever forget that. But I also know that moment didn't break me. It built me. One evening, just after the sun dipped behind the skyline, Lila and I were sitting in the park near our place. She had a sketch pad in her lap, working on something new. I watched her, marveling at how the light hit her face just like it did when she was little, twirling in a tutu in front of our old fireplace. "Do you hate them?" she asked suddenly, not looking up. I didn't need to ask who she meant. I thought about it. Then I said, "No." She blinked, surprised. "I don't hate them," I continued. "Because if I let hate define me, then I'd still be living in their world." She nodded slowly. "I think I'm just done with them," she said. And with that, she tore the page from her sketchbook and handed it to me. It was a drawing of 2 figures. One small. Fragile. In a wheelchair. The other, tall, carrying her through fire. At the bottom, she had written one line. "Some people bury their past. We chose to grow from it." The Monroe name used to mean something in our town. Something clean. Reputable. Perfect. Now. It means something else entirely. And I'm okay with that. Because the truth, no matter how twisted, still came out. And Lila? She's not a victim. She's the proof that even in the face of betrayal, there can be survival. Even in the face of murder, there can be justice. Even in the ashes of a family, something beautiful can grow. Because love, real love, doesn't push you off a cliff. It carries you back. Every damn time.